This video is brought to you by MacroFactor, the single best app for helping you track your weight loss and nutrition goals. Get 14 days for free when you sign up using offer code SKILLUP. Stick around to the end of the video to learn more. Gamers, what's going on? Good to see you. Welcome back. I am in very high spirits since I just finished up my time with DK Bonanza, and let me tell you, that is another all-timer right there. In a year that's already served up a number of all-timers, my Game of the Year pick is still Claire Obscure, but it is going to face some stiff competition from that big gorilla, not to mention Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, and while I didn't enjoy Death Stranding as much as other people did, I'm pretty sure it's going to be a contender as well. Will Destiny 2 Edge of Fate also join the Game of the Year nominee ranks? Something tells me that's unlikely. So yeah, Destiny 2. I know a lot of people's eyes glaze over when I talk about this game. I get it, I really do. But there is a lot happening here with this expansion that hasn't happened before, and none of it is good. If you haven't been paying attention, Destiny has been getting annual expansions since basically forever, and the quality of them has ebbed and flowed quite a bit, with high watermarks like the Taken King and Forsaken, and offerings well below the waterline like Shadowkeep and Lightfall. Regardless of expansion quality, people kept turning up, but as we discussed last week, that didn't happen with the game's most recent expansion, Edge of Fate. That one peaked at just 100,000 concurrent players on Steam, which is less than a third of what most of the other recent expansions have delivered. It's a deeply troubling metric since games like these are very much dependent on a player base that naturally drifts away from the game between expansions and has to be able to count on those players coming back to play through new expansion content. When that loop is broken, it's almost impossible to predict what that means for the game or the studio making it. Perhaps more concerning though is the sentiment towards this expansion. Now listen, I've been around since Destiny's alpha days back in like, I don't know, 1943 or whatever. And let me tell you, outside of the Curse of Osiris, I really struggle to recall a time when community sentiment has been so universally negative toward an expansion. Even Lightfall was somewhat redeemed by the Strand subclass, which was frankly incredible, but Edge of Fate hasn't got anything like that. All it has are changes to core game progression systems that nobody seems to like, and they really just make Destiny even more grindy than it already was, if such a thing were even possible. The game's subreddit is basically a salt mine of frustrations and grievances, and on Steam the expansion sits at a very disappointing mixed 44% rating. It got even worse this past week when it was revealed that the annual raid race, which is the most important event on the Destiny calendar, was rife with cheating. This is the event where your really hardcore players all do a hard version of a newly released raid that's only available for 3 days before it's gone for good, and all you really get for doing it is an emblem and some bragging rights, but it's a big deal for people who take Destiny seriously. That raid was incredibly challenging this year with some super high damage gates, but some teams managed to clear it. The only problem, it appears as though around 70% of those teams cheated, with obvious tells being that some teams were able to clear this staggeringly difficult raid in like 20 minutes, or one person would basically have all of the kills and everyone else only had a handful, or they'd clear the raid with as few as 2 people in a fire team where 6 highly skilled non-cheating players would have struggled. Bungie hasn't yet responded to this cheating situation, but that might be because the Destiny team is the leanest it's ever been after successive rounds of layoffs. The reception to this expansion is surely only going to add to this team's already intense workload and the pressure on them, but they got to do something. The Destiny community is in open revolt right now, and the game really can't afford to lose any more players than it already has. While we're on the topic of struggling live services, you guys remember Suicide Squad? Would it shock you if I were to remind you that this game came out last year? How is that even possible? It really does feel like ancient history at this point, so maybe that's why Warner Brothers seems to have completely forgotten its lessons and are now currently hard at work on yet another live service superhero game. Lord, give me strength. Here's the background to this one. Warner Brothers, bad. Okay, you're all caught up, you're welcome. But I guess there are a few other salient details worth covering. This is the media conglomerate that owns the rights to the DC properties, and for whatever reason, they thought it would be a good idea to get Rocksteady, who made the legendary Batman Arkham series, to work on a live service Suicide Squad game. Because if there's one thing people love more than the Suicide Squad, it's a live service video game centered on those anti-heroes brutally murdering the likes of Batman and Superman. Anyway, you all know how that ended. The game bombed, Warner Brothers Games Division had to write down over $200 million, and the game will not be getting any future content updates, leaving the executives who imagined a $1 billion franchise rather disappointed. But to be fair, I'm sure they all got their bonuses and promotions, so they'll be just fine. Anyway, with that sort of bruising episode behind them, you'd think that Warner Brothers might be inclined to change tack. Wrong. How about we just do the same thing again, but hope it works this time? Enter Warner Brothers Montreal, the studio that previously put out the rather middling Gotham Knights, which at one point was going to be a live service game before they pivoted back to it being a regular-ass video game. It didn't help though, and at this point Gotham Knights is best remembered for having the single worst UI in the history of video games. I still cannot believe this screenshot is real. Anyway, check out this job listing that just went up on their website. Quote, as an executive producer, you will lead the development of a high-quality AAA game based on one of the iconic IPs from the vast Warner Brothers and DC Comics catalog, end quote. Listed under qualifications and experience, it says that you must have a, quote, deep understanding of the full game development lifecycle, including live services, end quote. Under the execution and market readiness bullet point, it says that the successful candidate will, quote, oversee post-launch content and live service strategy, ensuring ongoing player engagement, end quote. Oh no. This is the problem though, right? Warner Brothers recently reorganized their gaming business to focus on their 4 big IPs: Harry Potter, Mortal Kombat, Game of Thrones, and DC. There is no way that this publisher is going to start spinning up new IPs or little indie titles, and so they're making another game based on DC makes sense. It being a live service, well, that part we can't lean into too heavily just yet. We have no idea what sort of game they're working on and what they might mean when they say live service. The reality is, when Warner Brothers reorganized, they specifically said that they want to reinvest in live services. They want that one big hit that's going to make them that $1 billion. And like every other publisher, they don't mind blowing a few $100 million on that gamble, because that's just the cost of doing business for these publishers. Most of the time, it's going to flop, but the one time it doesn't, everyone gets a new private jet. So the cycle will continue, though after the last few years and how entrenched so many of the long-term live service games have become, I do expect we'll see fewer of these bets than we did as little as 2 or 3 years ago. Or at least we can only hope, I guess. Speaking of live services, let's check in with one of the granddaddies of the live service business model, EA. They did an earnings call this week ahead of the reveal for Battlefield 6, slated for just about the time this video goes live actually. TLDR, EA is doing just fine and dandy, making lots of money thanks to their sports business, but Split Fiction did very well and they were happy about it, and Star Wars Battlefront 2 experienced an unexpected resurgence which resulted in a small but welcome windfall. EA CEO Andy Wilson also commented on the successful launch of Slow Clap's Rematch, a soccer game that's taken the world by storm, proving that there's still a market for sports games that aren't stuffed full to bursting with in-game spending. Wilson said of it, quote, as it relates to Rematch relative to FC, like every great sports team, we love competition. We come to work every day to compete, end quote. Doesn't sound like that, sadly. It'd be kind of cool if he did. Anyway, it sort of goes without saying that Rematch and EA FC are 2 very different games, so while EA is certainly noticing it, they aren't remotely bothered by it. What was interesting here is that Wilson also directly addressed the question of $80 new release games, which is highly topical at the moment given that Nintendo moved to that price point with Mario Kart World, and Microsoft triple somersault backflip dismounted away from that price point with the Outer Worlds 2. Here's what he said when asked if EA were looking to move to that price point, quote, we're not looking to make any changes on pricing at this stage. That's in the construct of we already offer a fairly broad pricing scheme across our various products. When you think about everything from free-to-play through to our premium products and our deluxe editions, our orientation is always to capture the full spectrum of pricing so that we can serve players in the best way possible and offer them the greatest value. We'll continue to look at opportunities to deliver great value to our players through various pricing schemes over the course of time, but no dramatic changes planned yet. This was underscored by the company's CFO, Stuart Canfield, who clarified that there were no plans to move to that price point for any new release this financial year, which ends March next year. Given that Battlefield is strongly rumored to be releasing this year, I guess we can expect a $70 price point for that one. Plus the Ultimate Edition, of course, and the Battle Pass, and the in-game cosmetics, and the paid DLC expansions, and that, you know what, you get the point. So yeah, EA are kicking the price hike can down the road for a little while yet. How long they continue to kick it though, definitely remains to be seen. Finally, let's talk about that Sony lawsuit against that blatant Horizon Zero Dawn ripoff called Light of Motorum. Not since Palworld has there been a game that's had the legal profession salivating as much as this one. From the moment it was revealed, it was pretty obvious that this one was going to end up in a court battle. If you haven't seen it before and you think the footage I'm showing you here is Horizon Zero Dawn, you'd be forgiven, but you're mistaken. This is Light of Motorum from Chinese-based Tencent, a game that the YouTube comment section is calling Horizon Timu Dawn. Obviously, it is beyond ridiculous how much this looks like a copy of the setting, aesthetics, and creature design of Horizon games, and Sony will not stand for it. They brought suit against Tencent, labeling Light of Motorum a, quote, slavish clone, end quote. More specifically, they allege, quote, Tencent misappropriates many of the most distinctive and recognizable protected elements of the Horizon franchise, including the franchise's overall tone and feel, setting, narrative, characters, and visual expression, end quote. The suit points to things like tribal characters, a red-headed protagonist, a focus device, machine creatures, and much more, but really, you can just look at the footage and see that this is a pretty open and shut case. Where this gets really juicy is that Sony have revealed that Tencent actually approached them back in March 2024 with an offer to license the Horizon IP for a mobile game, but Sony said no to that. They later learned that Tencent had been working on Light of Motorum since 2023, and when they saw how close it was to Horizon, they approached Tencent privately to sort the matter out. In response, Tencent again requested to license the IP, and Sony again said no. Tencent pressed ahead, and now a judge is going to have to sort it out. Sony is seeking $150K in damages per infringement, as well as any profits earned by Tencent from the use of their IP. Got to imagine that Tencent want to settle this one out of court, but I guess we'll see how it goes, so stay tuned. Hey, are you enjoying the show? If so, you might enjoy our website too, thisweekinvideogames.com. Get the news as it breaks in a 100% ad-free experience, plus reviews, previews, and expert columns like this week's from Dan Robson, the former editor of IGN Japan, who breaks down why the indie scene is so small in Japan, but why that might soon be changing. Sign up for free or become a supporter for even more benefits over at thisweekinvideogames.com. Link below the description. A quick lightning round to finish off, and sticking with Sony's news a moment longer, they just acquired a 2.5% stake in Bandai Namco in what they're terming a strategic partnership. This is mainly focused on the growth of anime, which is expected to continue to grow into the future. No, FromSoft games will not be going PlayStation exclusive, but who knows what the future holds, since there are always rumors that Sony are looking to fully acquire FromSoft's parent company, Kadokawa. Hollow Knight Silksong is a real video game that exists. No, it's true, I swear. And you know how I know? Xbox just announced that it's going to be playable at their booth at Gamescom this year. I was planning to attend Gamescom, but had to cancel that trip last minute, genuinely kicking myself that I won't get the chance to go hands-on with this one. They're making a Wolfenstein TV series. The production studio from the Fallout TV show are behind this one, and if they don't cast Alan Richardson, aka Jack Reacher, then you might as well cancel the entire thing, because there is absolutely no way this show should ever get made without him involved. Microsoft has introduced age verification for Xbox users in the United Kingdom. With the passage of the UK Online Safety Act, people will now need to prove their age before they can access certain websites, including social media, and since Xbox's platforms facilitate social interaction, it's implementing age verification if you want to make full use of Xbox's social features. There are various ways to confirm your age, but most of them involve disclosing very personal information that may leave you at risk if those collection platforms are ever compromised. The act is similar to legislation currently being drafted in a number of other countries and territories, including Australia. I haven't really spoken about this topic too much, but I will say that between payment platforms censoring online content and governments demanding you upload personal information so you can chat with your friends on Xbox Live, we are entering a very dangerous era that is equipping both capital and governments with unprecedented powers to censor our most important communication tool, the internet. All of these censorship tools will one day be used against us in ways that are far more nefarious than just restricting our access to Xbox Live. Of that I have absolutely no doubt. So while I am sympathetic to the need to ensure online safety for young people, all of this seems like far too high a price to pay. And speaking of which, various video game industry bodies have issued statements relating to the delisting of games from Steam and itch.io in response to pressure from payments platforms who themselves were pressured by the Australian-based Collective Shout, a conservative activist group with a long history of trying to censor video games, films, and music that they don't like. Speaking of this week in Videogames.com, the Australian-based IGEA had this to say, quote, "Creativity and artistic freedom are essential to a thriving and diverse games industry. All creative works must operate within the legal frameworks of the countries in which they are distributed. Navigating this balance is not always easy, but is essential to ensure both the protection of creative expression and compliance with applicable laws. We remain committed to supporting developers as they exercise their creative rights responsibly and within the boundaries of local regulation," end quote. The UK's UKIE had something similar to say, quote, "The UK games industry champions creative freedom while taking its responsibility to players seriously. Clear and consistent age ratings are a crucial part of helping people make informed choices about the content they engage with. That's why UKIE strongly supports the use of robust classification systems like PEGI across all platforms, including those hosting adult or experimental content. This ensures that content is labeled appropriately, that young audiences are protected, and that creators can publish with transparency. We believe payment providers and platforms alike should have confidence in trusted age rating systems and enforcement mechanisms behind them," end quote. Now, those bodies do by and large represent publishers, but here's a statement from the IGDA, the Independent Games Developers Association. Quote, "IGDA does not condone or support content that promotes or fetishizes sexual violence, non-consensual sexual acts, or the sexualization of minors. Our advocacy focuses specifically on developers creating consensual, lawful, and ethically developed games, and we support clear, consistent content policies, not vague or overly broad censorship. Games, like any medium of artistic expression, can explore themes of intimacy, pleasure, trauma, or identity. When created ethically and distributed legally, these works deserve to be evaluated fairly, transparently, and contextually, not swept aside due to stigma or third-party pressure," end quote. Sadly, this recent action by Steam and itch.io creates a notable precedent. It is a big win for the likes of Collective Shout and organizations like them, so this one instance is absolutely going to be the thin end of the wedge, and I do expect more censorship of games and other media in the months and years to come. Some quick sales data to top you off now. Blades of Fire has underperformed. This was the one from Metroid Dread developer Mercury Steam, only it definitely didn't meet that high quality bar, as the game currently sits at a fairly middling 72 on OpenCritic. Publisher 505 Games attributed the poor performance to, quote, "an oversupply of new releases and increasingly selective consumers," end quote. but it probably didn't help that this one was an Epic exclusive. I mean, damn, are they still doing those? The Elder Scrolls Oblivion Remastered has surpassed 9 million players, while Elden Ring Night Rain just surpassed 5 million, just in time for its Duos game mode to roll out. Best news of the week though, Rematch has passed 5 million players, which is absolutely absurd. I knew this one would go big, but I wasn't expecting it to go quite that large. A big congrats to Slow Clap. Please never add any Ultimate Team stuff, okay? I know it's very tempting, but please resist. So what got announced or delayed last week? Hey, did you see that Pokemon Present stream? Well, don't worry if you didn't, because it sure was pretty disappointing. The biggest highlight was the hour-long DJ Pikachu set that served as the pre-show to the whole thing, so I'm glad we have that in the world. But otherwise, the showcase pretty much consisted of small updates to the many live service Pokemon games and things we already knew about, a new trailer for Pokemon Legends ZA, a release date of 2026 for Pokemon Champions, that Battle Stadium focused game for Switch and mobile, and an update on the Aardman Pokemon animation, which is coming out sometime in 2027. I mean, I guess there was one surprise drop, the Pokemon Friends, a casual puzzle game that's free to play on mobile and $10 on Switch. It's apparently not great, but hey, let's just focus on DJ Pikachu for a bit. All bangers all the time. Taking a sharp left turn now, shortly after this show went live last week, Saber Interactive announced a new game based on Clive Barker's Hellraiser, the iconic 1980s horror film about scary sadomasochistic dudes from another dimension. This one is going to be a first-person action survival horror affair, and man, the trailer kind of already makes me wince. We're going to have to edit around some of this gore, or we're going to get demonetized. No release date for this one just yet. That's not the only horrific 80s horror property that had an announcement last week, sort of. Are you old enough to remember that weird trend of turning violent 80s action films into kid-friendly Saturday morning cartoons? Well, one of them was Toxic Crusaders, an adaptation of the gory splatter film series that has a Peter Dinklage reboot coming up. And of course, it's become the subject of a modern retro co-op beat 'em up, because what 80s and 90s IP doesn't have one of these at this point? It's slated for the 4th of December this year. Staying with unsettling things for a little longer, Randy Pitchford posted a selfie video on Twitter to let everyone know that the Switch 2 version of Borderlands 4 is coming out on October 3rd, 2025, and he finally got an overdue haircut, thank God. The Switch 2 release is about 3 weeks after the game hits PC, PS5, and Xbox Series consoles, and Pitchford also confirmed that there is no way the game data is going to fit on a 64 gig cart, so there will be a mandatory download even for physical copies. Heading back to historical Japan now, Ubisoft talked about the roadmap for Assassin's Creed Shadows last week, and with it came the announcement that the release date for the game's first story expansion, Claws of Owaji, is set for 16th of September this year. It's free for anyone who pre-ordered the game, and they say it'll have around 10 hours of content, which includes new story, new regions to explore, enemy factions, weapons, all that sort of stuff. If for some reason you wanted even more of this video game, then here comes more of it. While we're on the topic of roadmaps, the team behind Mind's Eye detailed their upcoming plans, which mainly includes multiple instances of the phrase, quote, performance improvements and bug fixes, end quote. In addition, they have postponed a previously announced crossover between Hitman and Mind's Eye to an undecided future date after it was previously scheduled for July. Personally, if I was 47, I'd put on my silly clown disguise and get as far away from this game as I possibly could. Terminator 2D No Fate is one of those games I mentioned earlier, a modern retro throwback adaptation of the 80s movie. This one has been delayed to the 31st of October. It still looks pretty good, I think. The actual Super Nintendo and Mega Drive adaptation of the game was pretty bad, so this is probably what we would have actually wanted back in the day. Let's hope it doesn't already feel dated by the time it comes out. Elsewhere, Techland had delayed Dying Light the Beast by about a month, with a new release date of September 19th, which they say is simply to allow for extra polish, fair enough. And finally, there's one delisting and server closure announced for this week, Project Cars 3, which was the 2020 racing sim from Slightly Mad Studios and Bandai Namco. As with a lot of games that use real-world brand licenses, these things eventually expire and the games are pulled from sale. Exact same thing happened to Forza Motorsport just recently. This one will be delisted on August 24th of this year, and servers for the online features will be shut down on the 24th of February next year. As for what happens to this team, they got acquired by the legendary Codemasters, which then got acquired by EA, and then EA laid off a bunch of them multiple times. It's the sad circle of life, so be sure to grab Project Cars 3 for your collection before it's gone for good, though do note that it's still a full price release, which is very odd since most of the time soon to be delisted games get dumped out in a fire sale. We've reached out to Bandai Namco to see if we can expect a price drop anytime soon. Alright, moving on to some more positive things now. What came out last week? Well, let's go back in time just a little to catch up on some of the bigger releases we missed for the past few weeks. Wildgate is that new PvP multiplayer game set in space from Moonshot and Dreamhaven, the new publisher from Blizzard founder Mike Morhaime, and it seems to have got off to a pretty good start, but it could probably use a few more players if the PC numbers are any indication. On Steam, it's got a very positive user sentiment with about 2,300 reviews, with the phrase Sea of Thieves in space being thrown around a lot. Here's a review from Steam user Carolus, who has about 30 hours in this thing, saying, quote, "I can't begin to explain how this game ticks so many boxes and does it so well. It's an absolute blast. As someone who usually gets irritated with PvP games, the PvP in this game feels good and never overstays its welcome. There's so many different roles and tasks to do that can help your team achieve victory outside of just kill the other team. The game deserves to get huge," end quote. Its active concurrent playbase has been hovering around the 5,000 to 6,000 mark since launch, which isn't too shabby, though worth noting that this is not a free-to-play game. It's also available on Xbox and PlayStation with cross-player multiplayer enabled as well. Really hope it does well. Austin really enjoyed this one. Wheel World was that chill open world cycling game from Annapurna and Mesoft. This one currently sits at a strong 76 on OpenCritic, but there is a bit of a divide from people who are loving the low-key vibe and others who are finding it a little too boring. Eurogamer ended up liking this one quite a bit, giving it one of the highest scores at 4 stars out of 5. They said, quote, "When it comes to the feeling, Wheel World is its own thing. It's exhilarating and brisk and rather personal. I want to say human size in terms of its focus and sense of scale. At its best, it's even quietly restorative. On a bad day, playing Wheel World will make you feel a bit better. It's focused quite neatly on a sensation that games don't visit that often. Pedal power, and through that it manages to cover dreamy exploration and thrilling competition," end quote. Once again, we're going to transition from something nice and calm to Killing Floor 3, because when it comes to violent video game names, it really doesn't get much better than this. Tripwire's latest in the zombie survival series has landed at a fair 72 after that delay addressed some playtest feedback, with the general consensus hovering around that range. PC Gamer landed very close to the pin on this one, 74 out of 100. Ultimately, they said, quote, "Killing Floor 3 is fun, quick to pick up, and builds on what worked for its predecessors, and while there'll always be a place for gory multiplayer shooters, they are a dime a dozen, and this one doesn't do a lot to stand out from the rest," end quote. Jumping back into the family-friendly pool now with the annoyingly named Super Mario Party Jamboree Nintendo Switch 2 Edition plus Jamboree TV. That is its actual name, by the way. Are you looking for a new Nintendo Switch 2 game? Then for the love of God, buy Donkey Kong Bonanza. My video review below the like button and up on thisweekinvideogames.com. But if you are curious about this one too, you might want to know that it landed at a strong 79 on OpenCritic, with most liking the new mouse-based games well enough, but IGN pointed out some of the frustrations with how this package is put together when they gave it a 7 out of 10, saying, quote, "Its camera-focused content is pretty forgettable, but there are a few worthwhile additions like the great mouse control minigames and interesting new rule sets. However, it's hard to enjoy them to the fullest due to how this content is divided across the 2 separate versions that don't talk to each other at all. Core features like achievements, unlockables, minigame records, and even rule sets are locked behind the Switch 1 version, which shockingly got 0 performance or resolution updates like the Jamboree TV portion did. If the new stuff had been seamlessly integrated with the old under one umbrella, this one would have been a slam dunk, but as it stands, if you already own Jamboree, I only recommend upgrading if you're really interested in the new content," end quote. Damn, Nintendo really phoned it in with this one, didn't they? All right, let's move on now to Chang Fallen Feathers. This one's been absolutely slammed on Steam this past week owing to several performance issues that the developers have already profusely apologized for, and they're working to address them. At the time of writing, it's clawed its way back up to a mixed rating on Steam with 26,000 reviews counted, but weirdly, very few of the critic reviews for this one made mention of those technical issues. Austin was reviewing this one for us, and he said he was quite surprised at how widespread these technical issues were too. Performance aside, on OpenCritic it's landed at a strong 75, with a modest spread of scores from 5 to 8, though that's basically the whole gamut when you're talking about review scores. GamesRant landed on 8 out of 10 for this one. Here's what they concluded, quote, "Chang Fallen Feathers is a traditional Souls-like at its core, but it finds its footing through a combination of well-integrated systems and strong design choices. The story doesn't break new ground, relying on the amnesiac hero trope and a mysterious disease as its foundation, but its historical fantasy setting, branching outcomes, and surprisingly effective character interactions make the journey worthwhile. The world itself is large enough to reward exploration without becoming overwhelming, and its visuals, ambient detail, and hidden areas offer a consistent sense of discovery. It never tries to match the scale of a game like Elden Ring, but its tighter structure works better for it," end quote. Incidentally, Austin did recommend this one. He too found it to be fairly derivative, but it does nail the fundamentals, and its quality of life features make for a fairly accessible journey for those who are newer to the Souls-like subgenre. If you want to see the full video, I've left a link to the review below the like button, as well as a link to the write-up over on thisweekinvideogames.com. Enjoy. Next, let's check in with that Lord of the Rings game that we became very skeptical of after the worrying previews and reportedly troubled development and a number of delays. Tales of the Shire, the cozy Hobbit life sim game. Our skepticism appears to have been justified since this one has landed at a weak 64 on OpenCritic, with several critics talking about its poor technical performance and a game loop that is just a bit too simple. Here's IGN, who landed on a pretty brutal 4 out of 10, and they they weren't the only ones. Quote, "I had a lot of hope that this would be the perfect mix of a genre I love and the Tolkien world I've spent much of my life nerding out about. Those hopes were cast into the fires from whence they came. With life sim mechanics that are as shallow as they come, terrible technical performance, and almost nothing original to say, Tales of the Shire disappoints every step of the way. There's hints at a better game to be found in its slightly more robust cooking mechanics, as well as the occasional amusing writing and dialogue that proves this setting was indeed right for a life sim, if executed better. But like a Silmaril, those dreams have vanished deep beneath the depths of the Angband," end quote. And finally, Grounded 2 hit early access this week, and it's already doing really well for itself if the Steam concurrent player count numbers are anything to go by. Just shy of 50k last I looked, and that's not even counting people who are playing on Game Pass. Over on OpenCritic, it's sitting at a strong 80, with a few outlets committing to an early access score. IGN actually gave it an 8 out of 10 and seemed very positive about its future, saying, quote, "Out of the early access gates, Grounded 2 is well on its way to becoming one of my favorite survival games ever, even in its very incomplete and fairly buggy state. The story, exploration, and RPG mechanics have all been enlarged in a big way, and the addition of mountable insect pets is exactly as much of a game changer as I hoped it would be. There's certainly a lot of room for Grounded 2 to grow in early access, including enemy variety, some more memorable spaces, a better base building system, and especially technical performance, but as incomplete as it is, Obsidian already very clearly has something special on its hands, and it promises to be the evolution of this small but mighty series that I was hoping for," end quote. So what's coming out this week? Another big week for small games, actually. Thursday is the big day this week, of course, with a couple of horror games, a couple of short-length games, and one retro revival. Let's start with Heartworm, which we've talked about a number of times on the show before. This is a survival horror game with a 90s PlayStation 1 and VHS perspective, where you play a woman hoping to reunite with her dead grandfather by following conspiracy theories she found on the internet and exploring places she absolutely should not be wandering into. This one comes from indie horror publisher Dread XP, who has put out a bunch of interesting stuff lately. This one's coming to all platforms. Dead Take is another spooky title arriving on Thursday. This is the new one from Tales of Kenzara's Surgeon Studios, and man, was there a quick turnaround on this one. It's a first-person psychological horror game set in a mysterious mansion with puzzles involving full-motion video footage, and a cast of prominent voice actors make up the cast. Apparently this one's been influenced by a lot of real-world horror stories about Hollywood, so aspiring actors do take note. PC only for this one. Here's one of the short games this week, Dear Me, I Was. This is the new one from the fighting game developer Arc Systems Works, who surprised everyone with this announcement of something that is definitely not a fighting game. It's pitched as a simple experimental visual novel about the life of an ordinary woman, and its watercolor art style is the big hook. The art director for this one was also instrumental in Nintendo DS games like Hotel Dusk and Another Code, both of which certainly had a cult following. This one is a Switch 2 exclusive, and they priced it for just a few bucks. I guess you could say that the biggest game of this week is Ninja Gaiden Ragebound, which is also coming out on Thursday, but even this one sees Koei Tecmo recruit an indie developer to take charge, the studio behind 2D Souls like Blasphemous to be specific. Again, a modern retro adaptation since they're all the rage, pun intended, but it does bring the series back to its original side-scrolling roots. Pixel artwork looks really nice, and the Game Kitchen certainly has a way with 2D game feel, so very high hopes for this one, all platforms. Jumping over to next Tuesday, August 5th, remember when Square Enix commissioned a mobile front mission game and then cancelled it, and then the developer behind it was like, we'll just make our own game that kind of uses a lot of the assets and release it and hope that Square doesn't sue us, but then Square totally sued them, and now this game exists. It's called Mecharashi, and it's coming to PC and mobile in the West. It's a free-to-play tactical strategy game with mechs, and it's got gacha, and it's definitely not Square Enix's beloved franchise front mission. At least that's what the courts say. You guys can decide that for yourself. Since it's a little quiet this week, we figured we'd put the magnifying glass over another notable small game, so put this on your radar. This is Time Flies. We've mentioned it on the show before. Having now played it and had a good little time with it, we thought it was deserving of some extra love. This is a neat little video game from a developer in Copenhagen called Playables, who made a bunch of cool, weird games in the past that sort of border on digital toys, hence the studio's name. This one's got a bigger hook to it though. Imagine a game with a Hitman or Untitled Goose Game style checklist of obscure and amusing objectives you need to discover and complete, only you're a housefly and you only have a few seconds to live. Can you work it all out before you die? Can you do all of them before you die? The other funny hook here is that your country's average life expectancy informs how long your fly has to live, giving that little bit of extra challenge depending on where you live. This one will be out by the time you see this vid for PC, Switch, and PS5. And honestly, it's the perfect title for anyone who just picked up a PS5 Pro recently. Really, pushes the frontiers of graphical fidelity. If you like the look of it, we left a link to it over on our Steam curator page, which also has links to all of the other put this in your radar stuff we recently covered. I'll leave a link to all of that below the like button. Sort of free stuff time now, and you still have time to grab Legion TD2 to relive those Warcraft 3 mod days if you were alive back then. And on August 1st, the Epic Game Freebies continue its streak of offering every single game that Czech studio Amanita Design has ever made with Pilgrims. The studio can do almost no wrong when it comes to this genre of game, and the games are always full of character, so definitely worth picking up this one to play around with it. On PlayStation Plus next month, they're giving away some good ones. Arguably one of the best non-FromSoft Souls-likes, Lies of P. Also on offer is the original PvPvE survival game DayZ. Still a ton of people playing that one on PC at least. And finally, there's My Heroes 1 Justice 2, which is of course based on My Hero Academia, just in case you need more anime arena fighters in your life. Over on the Nintendo Switch Online, they've just released Mario Paint for Super Nintendo this past week. The art, animation, and music composition program that was one of the only reasons to buy a mouse for that console. You can also play this one on a Switch 1 or 2, but if you're on Switch 1, you'll have to BYO USB mouse to play around with it. Switch 2 though, you already know you covered. Our feel-good story for the week might just get us demonetized by Visa and MasterCard, but god damn it, this story deserves to be told. It comes courtesy of Automaton West, who spotted a viral Reddit post that claimed that when Pokemon was first being localized for Western markets, people at Nintendo of America proposed a Pikachu design that had, quote, huge breasts, end quote. That is awesome. In fact, it's a little bit too awesome, leading some to suspect that it was likely a mistranslation, resulting in the Reddit post being taken down by moderators. However, Japanese game outlet GameSpark was determined to get to the bottom of this one, and the results will shock you. Nearly as much as the sight of a Pikachu with huge breasts. They tracked down an old interview from the gold and silver era with Pokemon Company CEO Tsunekazu Ishihara, and it seems as though NOA did, in fact, propose a sexy Pikachu, quote, "When I first showed Pokemon to them, they told me it was too cute. The staff at Nintendo of America then suggested their own designs for the characters. I won't show those illustrations to anyone as long as I live, but they kind of look like the characters from the Cats musical. So for example, Pikachu was changed into a character shaped like a kind of tabby cat with huge breasts," end quote. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. More evidence of the rampant censorship that denies us our God-given right to big boobied Pokemon. Never forget what they took from us. All right, ladies and gents, that is it. We are done for the week and the month, in fact. And we head into what will be a pretty chilled out August. Not a lot of big stuff dropping, so a good chance to catch up on your backlog. I actually just reinstalled Battlefield 2042 because I was curious to see where it landed at its end of life. I heard it got better, but not by much. But I guess I'll find out. Austin is currently working on a review for the Alters, so stay tuned for that one. While Edmund is doing a fantastic job running things over at thisweekinvideogames.com, so be sure to stop by and check that out. Sign up if you haven't already. It's free, but there's a supporter tier as well if you want some bonus content, plus ad-free versions of this show, or you just want to support the work that we do. Easiest way to support us, though, is just to drop this video a like, so please go right ahead. We always appreciate that. Subscribe, ding the notification bell, and be sure to come back next week because the fun never ends, except for when the videos end, which is what's happening right now. The video is ending, but do stick around for this video's sponsor, Macro Factor. Not gonna lie, guys, I do struggle with my fitness goals. This life of ours where we sit around playing too many video games, it doesn't naturally lend itself to an Adonis-like physique. But I've always done my best to exercise regularly, and I've used apps of various forms to track my calories and my exercise goals and all that sort of stuff. A few months ago though, I started using this video's sponsor, Macro Factor, and honestly, I wish I had discovered it years earlier because this is by far and away the single best weight and nutrition tracker I've ever used. Here's the thing about Macro Factor. Other apps create a really simple, static framework for how you think about your calories in and out. So you'll say, I'm this weight and I want to be that weight. And those apps will just say, okay, cool, just eat this many calories every day for the next X number of days and you'll hit your ideal weight. But life doesn't work like that. We don't eat the same number of calories every single day. One day we're really healthy and we eat clean, and the next day we smash pizza. One day we're feeling really strong and motivated and we go to the gym, and the next day we're like, I'm not really feeling it today, and we don't, right? Other apps can't really keep up with that sort of fluctuation, but the difference with Macro Factor is that it uses really powerful algorithms to constantly update your daily goals based on your day-to-day progress. So if you're having a bad week without much exercise and with a few too many tacos, Macro Factor will dynamically update your daily goals to get you caught back up in no time. It doesn't hurt that the user interface is the best of the best. It's incredibly easy to use, incredibly easy to log your food and your exercise, to see the recommendations that the app is serving you. In fact, you can actually just take a picture of a plate of food, and Macro Factor can then estimate how many calories are on that plate, but there's also the ability to like, scan barcodes or even just input your own recipes if that's what you prefer. MacroFactor has given me so much insight into my own nutrition and made it so much easier to work towards my goals. I've actually lost around 5 kilos or so since I started using it. Obviously that's to do with playing a lot of tennis, sure, but being able to track my calories also doesn't hurt. I still have plenty to go, but I'm feeling pretty happy with the progress I've made, and I'm certainly going to be sticking with MacroFactor for a long time to come. If you want to check it out for yourself, then click the link below or search for MacroFactor on the app or Google Play stores. Be sure to use offer code SKILLUP when signing up to get 14 days for free. That's offer code SKILLUP for 14 days free. Thanks MacroFactor for sponsoring the video, and thank you for watching it.